Welcome to a world where darkness reigns, where desires run deep and secrets linger in the shadows. This is Vampire Stories, your sanctuary for tales of lust, power, and immortality. Tonight we delve into the origins of Selene, a vampire whose curse became her salvation and whose hunger knows no bounds. So dim the lights, silence the world outside, and let yourself be drawn into the shadowy embrace of our story. But beware, once you step into Selene's world, there's no turning back. Episode 4, The Curse of Selene. Setting, a grand masquerade ball, Paris, 1789. The opulence of the room was suffocating. Gilded chandeliers, silk-clad dancers, and masks hiding secrets as deep as the revolution brewing outside. In the corner, Antoine entertained a group of masked nobles, his voice weaving through the music like a spell. "Ah, you wish to know of Selene?" Antoine asked, his smirk barely visible beneath his own mask. He sipped his wine, his voice lowering. "Very well, but beware, for hers is not a tale of love. It is one of blood and betrayal." Antoine's tale, Selene's mortal life. Selene was born in a time when a woman's fate was not her own. She was the jewel of her father's court, a beauty unmatched, but beauty in those days was a curse. Promised to a man old enough to be her grandfather, she lived a life of gilded chains. Her heart, they say, was fierce, a fire no cage could contain. The night before her wedding, she fled into the dark forest, pursued by her father's men. It was there, amid the ancient trees, that her life ended and began again. The encounter with Voreas. The scene shifts to Selene, dressed in a torn gown, barefoot and bleeding, stumbling through the moonlit woods. The sound of hooves thundered behind her, her father's men closing in. Just as she collapsed, the shadows seemed to come alive. A figure emerged, a man with pale skin and eyes like molten gold. Voreas. His voice was silk and steel, promising both salvation and damnation. "You run from one prison into another," he said, circling her like a predator. "But I offer you freedom, true freedom. No man, no mortal, will ever own you again." Selene's breath hitched as she gazed up at him. What do you want in return?" "Only your loyalty," Voreas replied, his fangs gleaming in the moonlight. "And your humanity." Her answer was a whisper. "Yes." The transformation. Antoine's voice trembled slightly as he described what happened next. They say her screams echoed through the woods, a sound that froze the blood of her pursuers. When they found her, or what was left of her, she was no longer the girl they knew. Her eyes burned crimson, and her lips dripped with the blood of her would-be captors. Selene's first moments as a vampire were chaos. The hunger was all-consuming, a fire in her veins. She tore through the soldiers, her movements a blur of violence and grace. When the last man fell, she turned to Voreas, her maker, and asked, "What now?" His reply was simple, "Now you are mine." Selene's rebellion. For centuries, she served him, Antoine continued, his voice growing softer. A thrall to his whims, a weapon to destroy his enemies. But Selene was no docile servant. Every act of obedience was laced with quiet defiance. She studied him, learned his weaknesses, and waited. Their final confrontation was as bloody as it was poetic. Selene, the pupil, turned on her master. She drove a blade of silver into his heart and drank his ancient blood, claiming his power for herself. The crowd leaned in, captivated. Selene's rise. Antoine straightened, his voice now filled with awe. From that night on, she was no longer a thrall, but a queen. She carved her own path, defying the rules of vampire kind. Some say she wanders the world, a shadow in the night, seeking vengeance against those who would dare to control her. The present. As Antoine concluded his tale, the masked nobles erupted into murmurs and speculation. Among them, a woman in a crimson gown sipped her wine, her ruby necklace catching the light. She smiled faintly, her eyes glowing for the briefest moment. Selene leaned over to Antoine as the others dispersed. "You do love embellishing the truth," she murmured. Antoine froze, his goblet slipping from his fingers. Selene rose, her presence both magnetic and terrifying. "But I'll forgive you," she whispered, brushing past him. This time, she disappeared into the night, leaving Antoine pale and trembling, his audience none the wiser. And so Selene's journey began, not as a queen, but as a girl defying her fate, only to forge her own. But her tale is far from over, and the shadows hold more secrets than you can imagine. If you've enjoyed this glimpse into the world of Selene, there's so much more to come. Subscribe and join us for more stories of desire, betrayal, and the eternal night. Until next time, stay curious, stay haunted, and remember, the shadows are never empty.